Good afternoon, Year 9. So our fourth lesson now on Much Ado About Nothing. Today we're going to be meeting the villain of the piece, you might say. Well, you definitely say Don John the Bastard, as he's called. We'll go into that in a bit later. Write down one sentence summarising each of the characters listed here's view on marriage. Benedict, Claudia and Beatrice. That's 5 minutes, then on to the next slide. Our learning objective today is to explore the personality of, well, I should say Don John. I've missed an N off there. So the title is Meeting Don John. So you've got the title in. It's the usual list of things that you need to have in front of you to do this lesson. You'll need a copy of the extract, which will be attached to Classcharts, and a whole play if you have one. Access to YouTube, even on your phone, is fine to look at these clips. And there's a link there that will give you a little summary up to where we are if you need that. Can't hurt to watch that. And some different coloured pens or highlighters. Right, here's Act 1, Scene 2, which we haven't read because we don't need to read every single tiny part of it. Act 1, Scene 2, what you missed. There's a catch-up clip there, catch-up YouTube clip, but broadly what happens is Leonardo is told by his brother Antonio, remember Leonardo's hero's father, that a servant overheard Don Pedro saying he will woo Hero at the masked ball. This could lead to some mishaps as they believe it's Don Pedro who is interested, not Claudio. So the confusion is beginning to build up. Okay, who is Don John? There's a clip there to help you. So watch the clip from Act 1, Scene 3, where Don John speaks with his servant Conrad. Write down your first impressions of Don John. What type of a person do you think he is? You don't need to write anything down here. Just give it a good listen. You can make some notes if you want. So what is the history of the relationship between John and his brother Don Pedro? So make some notes. Actually, sorry to be misleading there. As we go through just this little piece here, I don't need to copy it down. Just make some notes. Note taking is a skill you need to learn. So start now. Don John is the half brother of Don Pedro, who is the Prince of Aragon. It is implied that the two have not always got on well, but have recently become more friendly as Leonardo recognises that they have been reconciled. That means they're friends again. Don John is polite in company, but says so little it's difficult to work out much about him. Here's a little quote that shows that. Leonardo, let me bid you welcome, my lord. Being reconciled to the prince your brother, I owe you all duty. And then Don John says, I thank you. I am not of many words, but I thank you. Don Pedro is presented in contrast to Don John. He's the confident leader, welcomed kindly by Leonardo. We see him as a supportive friend to Claudio, but also joking with Benedict. Often in Shakespeare plays, pretty much all of them, their characters have opposites, or characters that kind of balance them out. Don John and Don Pedro are those. Don Pedro, confident, assured leader, able to have a laugh, got a sense of humour. Don John, we don't know so much about him, very quiet, stands around with a poker face. Ideal role for Keanu Reeves, really, and he did it very well. So that's just 2 minutes there. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay, just a little bit of context for Don John the Bastard. In the original text, Don John's character's name is linked to his identity as an illegitimate child, a bastard. This means that his parents were not married when he was born. Nowadays, this is quite common. In fact, in 2017, nearly half of all babies born in the UK were born to parents who were not married. So it's not a thing anymore, and quite rightly. But at the time, there was a stigma attached with being an illegitimate child, as it was seen as unacceptable for women to have sex outside of marriage, and therefore not blessed by God. Crucially, though, for those times, it means that Don Pedro is the one who inherits the title of prince, and presumably all the money and land too. Consider how Don John might feel about that. So they're brothers, Don Pedro and Don John. Don John was born out of wedlock, as it were, which means that he's not going to inherit anything. He's not going to become a prince. He's not going to inherit, lots of lovely houses and things. So, you could argue he's legitimately got a gripe there. Right, so here's a task for you. We're going to look at the first part of the scene. I want you to highlight quotations which present how Don John is feeling and explore what the language chosen suggests. So Conrad, what the good year, my lord? Why are you thus out of measure sad? Don John, there is no measure in the occasion that breeds, therefore this sadness is without limit. Conrad, you should hear reason. Don John, when I have heard it, what blessing brings it? Conrad, it's not a present remedy, at least a patient sufferance. Don John, I wonder what thou, being as thou sayest thou art born under Saturn, goest about to apply a moral medicine to a mortifying mischief. I cannot hide what I am. I must be sad when I have cause, and smile at no man's jests, eat when I have stomach, and wait for no man's leisure, sleep when I am drowsy, and tend on no man's business, laugh when I am merry, and claw no man in his humour. Conrad, yea, but you must not make the full show of this till you may do it without controlment. You have of late stood out against your brother, and he hath taken you newly into his grace, where it is possible you should take true root but by the fair weather that you make yourself. It is needful that you frame the season for your own harvest. Don John, I had rather be a canker in a hedge than a rose in his grace, and it fits my blood to be disdained of all than to fashion a carriage to rob love from any. In this, though I cannot be said to be a flattering honest man, it must not be denied but I am a plain-dealing villain. I am trusted with a muzzle and franchised with a clog. There I have decreed not to sing in my cage. If I had my mouth I would bite. If I had my liberty I would do my liking. In the meantime, let me be that I am, and seek not to alter me. Well, he's he pretty much lays out his stall in that last speech, Don John. A canker in a hedge. I'm a plain dealing villain. He's muzzled. All the information you need is there. So 10 minutes there for highlight what Don John is feeling, and explore. Just to take two of your quotes and find a word in each one and explore the connotations of that word. So I would rather be a canker in a hedge. A canker is a sort of, it's just like a small rubbishy thing that shouldn't be there really. So you could explore that. I'm a plain dealing villain. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So 10 minutes for that, year 10, then on to the next slide. Okay, here's one that I've done. Using these ideas, write a couple of sentences where you explore how Don John is presented in this scene. So there is no measure in the occasion that breeds, therefore the sadness is without limit. That's him saying how he's feeling. Don John says he must be honest about his feeling and has to behave how he feels. I won't read them all out. I had rather be a canker in a hedge than a rose in his grace, and it better fits my blood to be disdained all. It fits his blood to be hated, reference to his identity as a bastard and a bit of a social outcast. I think, if people think that Don John's been reconciled with Don Pedro, I think this part of this scene lets us know in no uncertain terms that Don John doesn't feel himself to be reconciled at all. So there we are. Have a close look at that. You can transfer some of these onto your annotated piece if it adds to what you've done. Now, using these quotations and sentences, I just want you to write, these ideas and quotations, I just want you to write a couple of sentences where you explore how Don John is presented in this scene. And here's one that I've done to give you an idea. In Act 1, Scene 3, Don John identifies himself as the villain of the piece. I am a plain dealing villain. Although people believe he is reconciled with his brother, he feels trapped, using metaphors of a muzzle and a cage to imply that he is like an animal without freedom. The word muzzle suggests an animal being controlled to prevent violent behaviour, and Don John emphasises this when he says, "If I had my mouth, I would bite." He clearly wants to cause pain and harm to others. He wishes to be destructive to his brother, like a canker in the hedge. And when you mention that this better fits my blood, we have a clue to his motivation. He is bitter because his brother is the legitimate son. I mean, there have been versions done of this play, notably modern updates, where it's not entirely clear why it is Don John is the way that he is. But I think this is true to Shakespeare's original intention. He's like this because he's an illegitimate son. He's treated differently, and he's not going to inherit anything. Now, melancholy, which is a kind of epic sadness, if you like. Which obviously Don John is suffering from. So we're just going to have a look at a particularly Elizabethan way of looking at people's personalities. So on the right there, Don John queries why Conrad doesn't understand his need to be sad, mentioning that Conrad was born under Saturn. In Renaissance astrology, Saturn was associated with a gloomy, heavy and brooding disposition. Being born under Saturn was paired with an excess of black bile and hence a melancholy disposition. This table shows the 4 humours of ancient Greek medicine, each linked to one of the 4 elements. It was believed that balance and purity of them is essential to maintaining health. It was thought that an excess of one humour led to certain personality traits. So let's have a look here. Sanguine. That's blood and air. Highly talkative, enthusiastic, active and social, extroverted, enjoy being part of a crowd, being social, outgoing and charismatic. Is easy to accomplish, have a hard time doing nothing, and engage in more risk-seeking behaviour. Choleric, that's yellow bile and fire. Tends to be more extroverted, independent, decisive, goal-oriented and ambitious, natural leaders, violent, vengeful and short-tempered. Now I'm not going to read them all out, but what I'd like you to do is to decide which one of those you think you are. Now here we are. Highlight language in this part of the scene that shows Don John is evil and explore what the language suggests. Don John, come, come, let us thither. This may prove food to my displeasure. That young startup hath all the glory of my overthrow. If I can cross him any way, I bless myself every way. You are both sure and will assist me? Conrad, to the death, my lord. Don John, let us to the great supper. Their cheer is the greater that I am subdued. Would the cook were of my mind. Shall we go and prove what's to be done? We'll wait upon your lordship. So highlight one piece of language that shows that Don John is evil and explore what that piece of language suggests. It's that connotations thing again. Here's what I've done for you. Have a close look at that slide and then go on to the next one. Add these annotations to your own annotations on this part of the scene. Now this is the task that I want you to upload onto Classcharts so that I can have a look at it. And I know I keep saying this, and I will keep saying it. The way you've embraced Classcharts and in general, and particularly this new idea of uploading all your work onto it so that we can have a look at it is brilliant. And the work I'm seeing is fantastic, Year 9. I'm so impressed. You're probably the hardest working class I've got. I mean, that's just on 1 week's looking, but I mean you always were anyway, so no surprises there either. So what I want you to do is to write a diary entry from Don John's perspective the night before the ball. Try to get into his evil voice. So he's sitting there crouched up in his room, all full of bile and hate, and he's going to scribble down in his diary all the terrible things that he thinks about everyone who's going and so on. So go to town on it. If you want to, after that, you can write a paragraph explaining how Don John is presented as a villain from the start of the play. Make sure you've included evidence. But really what I want to see is this diary entry so that we've all grasped what a piece of work this Don John is. So well done. I shall look forward to reading those Year 9. Take care and I'll see you tomorrow.